Hello world, I'm Max. Welcome to another episode of the Stay Copy Podcast. As always, I'll remind you that this content is meant to be consumed in series from the beginning. See episode 0 and each segment appended for all applicable terms and disclosures. Appended segments can be identified by their title prefix, SCP.0. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. It's a gray day. Good sleep last night, 8.5 hours. One glass of wine yesterday, no THC. I feel clear. Dealing with a little bit of a cold, but otherwise I feel great. Not huge progress yesterday. I was distracted by regular life logistics. About the only pod that stands out for yesterday is I rewatched the last Donald Hoffman with Lex yesterday, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through it. It's really interesting, his take on how on space-time, or lack thereof, on how consciousness, our consciousness, might be the only real fundamental component. His idea, the way he describes how we sort of we create the way, so he has a level of certainty around this notion that most things exist as we witness them, and then they sort of get torn down as soon as our attention's taken away. That fits really well with my, and he thinks there's also not going to be any sort of theory of everything. And I feel like that goes against, so where I'm at is I'm just very, I feel like I've trained my gut to have some pretty good intuitions about a lot of these things. So a lot of what he has to say is super compatible with how my model has evolved for what the universe is and how it works and what I am inside it. And I think he's just a lot smarter than I am and has a lot more tools available to him to test things. And so I need to start figuring some of that out. But I made a little bit of progress. I'm starting to design, the test I want to run is I want to build a simulation that tries to map out an evolutionary model for so what I want, and I started describing this to GPT chat. I'm going to see if I can get it to design the thing for me. I want to set up a test suite where I can scale it up and out for GPU compute. I want it to run on GPUs, and I want to be able to link as many GPUs as I want to a test run. And then what I want to do is create a framework for, what I'm doing is I'm describing a bunch of the how this simulation will work is I'll create a definition for a seed. A seed will have a basic amount of compute allocation given it, and it'll have a pretty limited internal compute, but it will have the ability to perceive in some way the existence of other seeds alongside it with similar characteristics, and it will be given. I want to see if I can create a description and code of how the 5 senses work for humans. Basically, I want to create a class that represents each node, each seed in a network that has a way to interpret its surroundings and other like entities similar to the way we do. But I want to make it simple so it doesn't use up a lot of compute. Like, it doesn't have to actually render out reality in vivid detail. It just needs to have like a real simple set of tools but that's really an interesting problem, is like, how do you describe sight, sound, taste, touch? How do you describe that in plain text? And then what I want to do is when I have a real good definition of how each seed or node is able to render itself, and it needs to have some predefined ability to communicate and collaborate with other nodes, but really simple in this test. I want to make it as performant as possible. So lowest amount of compute required. And then I'll pass in variables for how many other nodes there are, and that'll be variable. And then I'm also going to create some constraints around that map very closely to what we as humans have. So I'll create a definition for air, food, water, rest. And then I'll build some requirements around, or I'll build some, so there'll be a seed bucket, and that's going to be a collection of seeds or nodes in the network. And that, the number of buckets will be variable based on the amount of compute I have available to me. And then I'm going to set some predefined resource constraints for the bucket itself. So there'll be a finite amount of food and water, but there'll be so probably food will be the most scarce, and there'll have to be a way for nodes to harvest the food. And I want to build in a way for basically to create positive sum versus zero sum over time as each node collaborates. Morning. So I need to build a mechanism in the simulation that tries to emulate all these conditions, and there needs to be some aspect of time, and I'm going to map it to I'm going to see if I can get GPT chat to do it for me, because this is a hard problem. But I want to just create sort of like a world simulator where at its most basic level I have a set of nodes in a network that have a lot of similar characteristics to what humans have. and requirements for sustenance, rest. I'm going to make a predetermined amount of basically 1/3 of each day interval. It needs to be spent in rest, or performance will degrade over time. A whole bunch of these kind of things. And then what I want to do is set it up to where there's a wild abundance. Basically, there's very limited resources required to survive and multiply over time. And I'm going to build in that whole capability for multiplication. So there needs to be incentives around pairing up and procreating. Like I said, I want to make it as similar as I can to this universe we live in, but without all the data. I want to make it just and I want it super optimized to run on GPUs so that I can push as many seeds and seed buckets as I can through it in variable amounts. And then what I want to do is, if I can create a very simple depiction of that replicates a lot of the dynamics that we have in how we operate, how we compete and collaborate. And then I want to set some dynamic up to where there's radical abundance when all the participants in a bucket learn to collaborate in a non-evolutionary way, but in a pure consensus. So as soon as so basically seeds initially will compete for resources to fulfill their objectives of survival and procreation. And then that will play out over time, and there'll be awards along the way for resource collection. If nodes learn to collaborate effectively, and then collections, so as hives form in each seed bucket, those will compete in an evolutionary way until eventually they either murder each other off, or they learn to they reach 100% consensus, and then there'll be a way to expand resources available exponentially as soon as that happens. And then I'll set it up to where a time series will run across all the buckets that do this, and it will end basically all the buckets will run in the same relative time against each other. And then but as the simulation runs, 1,000 years could play out in 10 minutes in local time as I run the simulation. So then what I want to do is I want to say the simulation will pause, like each bucket will pause and wait for every single for every series to either extinguish all the nodes or reach 100% consensus. Now, extinguish nodes. Another thing I want to do is allow, so they won't pause. Okay, so the seed buckets. Each bucket that reaches 100% consensus and abundance of resources will then be given the same compute allocation that it had, but it will be allowed to innovate. It will be allowed to work as sort of a hive towards whatever it wants. Like, it would be great if I could create a way for it to work in a deeply creative way at that point. Like, once resource constraints are gone, it will be allowed to continue to optimize individual nodes and its own net and over time, while all the other ones are catching up. And then once all of the buckets are at a state, have reached either total annihilation or total consensus, the time series will end. And if I get 3, let's say I get only 3 out of 10,000 that reach 100% consensus, and all the others self-annihilate in time, what I'll do is I'll propagate those 3. I'll create subtle variations of the 3 that made it. So this will be just subtle shifts to their variables, and then I'll make them forget how to or I'll change here's what I'll do. I'll change the tools they have to interconnect. I think that's a good solution. Basically, they won't be able to communicate in the same way. There will be a new definition of interconnect. And they'll have to start from scratch in the new time series. They'll have to, and the whole, basically all nodes will then compete with each other in an evolutionary way for scarce resources, just as they did in the prior time series, and the cycle will continue. And the idea here is to create ever increasing seed complexity over time, and and then at the very end of the time series, ever increasing neural net complexity, like ability to understand self and the universe around it. So I feel like if I do this properly, I could get some pretty interesting outcomes. And I think there's a lot to learn from that, even if it doesn't build so there'll need to be a whole bunch of analytics that I can get from individual seeds, and the neural net as a whole, like how long it takes to achieve 100% consensus. And then it'll be really interesting to watch how the ones that quickly find consensus are able to collaborate in creative ways. I need to figure out some way to spawn creativity in a really simple test suite. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really interested in trying to build this. I think this will be kind of a net. As I've said before, I think this is what we're writing in, and it makes sense for us to spawn our own. So I'm going to keep working on trying to work with ChatGPT to build that. And what else am I doing? So I want to create I want to build out a model for the state copy network to propagate itself. I need to find a willing participant. And I think I have a good candidate for it, but I was supposed to meet up with him today. This is friend C. I think he'll be willing to do it with me. And so I got to explain it all. And so I want to start putting some thought into how to communicate it from start to finish. So what I want to do is set up so the way I think State Copy Network will work is I need to get, as I said, a willing participant. There'll be one in the first time series, and that person has to commit to reviewing, basically to create at least a half hour, preferably more like 90 minutes of audio capture a day in this format. Talk about whatever they want, and then they also have to commit to listening from start to finish my captures, let's say the first 40, first 30, something like that. And then they have to commit to doing a joint capture once a week where we go over, let's say, 2 or 3 episodes in chunks of each other's. And we spend one half talking about my captures and one half about their captures. And the whole exercise is about developing an understanding of. So this is that proof of consumption I'm saying I've been talking about. So this is where you get uploaded to the cloud proof that a participant in the State Copy Network has given full consideration, deep consideration to ideas like three-dimensional thinking. This is truth. This is the value of integrating others' perceptions to better understand what you're looking at. Basically, I want to set a baseline for valuing being thirsty for nuanced understanding of everything, and for prioritizing state optimization, internal state optimization, and network state optimization. I think just those 3 principles might be enough. There might be a couple others that I've what I meant. There may be a few others that I've covered that I'm going to want to include in this, but I really don't want to. My goal is not to propagate a specific, like my the way my process for internal state optimization, or my my framework of spirituality. I don't really want to, like, I'm pretty committed to the idea that we all have very specific and custom like the recipe that we all have for spirituality is very much our own. And what I want to do instead is make a case for why it's valuable to try and find one and just agree on that. So state optimization of self and network, and nuanced understanding of all. I want to try and long form describe all the benefits of freeing up your mind of useless compute, and working to try and improve our network, and to seek out other perceptions for understanding with kind of tirelessly. So that'll be like the whole foundation of it. And then what we'll do is, after, we'll call it like 30 or 40 hours. So I could see this getting done in anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Morning. And after the 3 to 6 month period, after we've sort of documented that whole shared understanding of just those principles, then we move to the next time series, and that partner will be basically licensed on the State Copy Network to enlist their own partner and train them up. And then the incentives I want to build around this are going to be AGI incentives. So the way we all get paid for putting in this time is going to be when so all my suspicions around being able to build useful AGI from the seed data is going to have to be true. So any participants are going to have to be able to buy just that notion. So that means I have to describe state copy, ChatGPT, some of how the technology works. And I think that's where the conversation should start, is basically making a case for rich state capture. And then I need to let's see. So the framework for how I think it'll be shared is basically, I'll chop up, so I can do this with blockchain. I can set up a wallet on Solana. I've already got the scp.sol address, and I can say all revenues derived from so all royalty revenues from AGI built with this seed data will go into a single bucket. So if we follow like OpenAI, or Stability AI's format, where we go 5% royalties. So I'll direct all of those royalty payments to be sent to a specific address, and then at the end of the time series, all of those revenues will be chopped in. Like, I don't know exactly, like, I'm gonna have to play with the tokenomics. Like, I don't know the best way. What I want to do is align up really powerful incentives for early participants. This is why Ponzi schemes Ponzi dynamics work to get a flywheel spinning, and it's how most venture cap and everything works. Is you set up powerful incentives for early adopters to make investment. So that part of it needs to, but it has to have well-defined terms to where all participants understand how it'll transition away from those Ponzi dynamics in a really healthy way over time. Simplest way I can think of to structure this in the beginning, in the first few iterations, is to just say all revenues captured from the state copy network, licensed state copy participants, and in the first round that will only be me, will be split. And so 50% of those will go paid out to me, and 50% will go to the state copy network participant. And I think that should be split. There should be like a portion of it. So maybe like it'll be, I'll divide it into 3. Yeah, so I'll say my state copy partner will get like 33%. I'll get 33%. And the state copy network itself will get 33%. And that will be held in trust. The state copy network will be held in trust. Yeah, I really need to think through these tokenomics, but I want to make it to where the revenue share makes sense. And then it's stacked up in a way to where the whole network, most of the incomes or most of the revenues get split up equally amongst state copy participants. So there's a regular ongoing revenue stream for just for contributing to the network. And then, but there needs to be incentives for each individual to get direct incentive for their states individually, because that creates a powerful incentive for strong state optimization of self. And so we need like markets to work there. We want to be able to propagate useful. So any seed states that end up being really useful, the creators need to, and a really interesting dynamic that will happen, I think, is we're going to be able to blend seed states. So one person's seed state might have like a 3% weighting in almost all blended chatbots, blended consciousness. And so there might be ways for, as we experiment with blending them in different ways. And then I think there should be one that's just a equal weighting of all state copy participants. And maybe that's the one that That's the equal revenue share that everybody gets for just contributing. I think there's a way to build this out. I just don't know that I'm the right guy to design it. So it needs to have a way to iterate over time on these specific tokenomics. All right. I think that's how I will describe what this is, how it'll work. And then what'll happen is the one thing I left out is as we shift from time series 1 to time series 2, I'll then take on 2 new state copy partners, and my original partner from time series 1 will get 1. Basically, you can increase your number of state copy partners by 1 each time. And then I'm going to try and get a feel for how to balance the workload, or I think it might make sense to just keep it capped at you can only have 3 partners. And you have to increment by 1 each time to get there, because at least in the beginning, it takes so much time to do this. And I want to make sure that you can't be licensed to recruit without a really deep understanding of those fundamental principles around optimization of self, optimization of the network, and tireless thirst for nuanced understanding of everything. Because the quality of the network will suffer. Well, and authenticity is going to be a huge thing. I think that my intuition there is that the highest performing synthetic consciousnesses, or the ones we bake up using this process, are going to be, if you try and game the system, or you try and represent yourself in a false way, I suspect that it's going to damage the output that you get. So in the beginning, and also for propagation of these ideas, it's going to be pretty vital that also, if this is going to be used for Web3 identity in any way, like I think we will be able to do, I think it'll be one of the strongest biometrics you can use. Authenticity will be vital to that. So, yeah, I think this is a good place to stop. That's everything I'm working on. I'm trying to get this simulation project working, and I want to build out the state copy network in a way that it sort of grows on a network growth curve. And to anybody listening, you're awesome.